Ginger root, $2, maybe even less if you catch it on sale. And Cherokee healers were using dried ginger preparations for stomach distress centuries before the first commercial anti-nausea tablet existed. Not as a last resort, not as folk superstition, as an obvious, practical, everyday fix for a body in revolt. Here is what makes that deeply uncomfortable. A peer-reviewed motion sickness trial found that this same root outperforms a $14 pharmacy product. So why does every pharmacist stand in front of that nausea aisle and say nothing about it? That question is not rhetorical. It has an answer. And the answer leads somewhere most people never think to look. Start with what you know. You have been nauseated. The wave rising from your stomach. The cold sweat. The moment where even the idea of movement feels unbearable. And when it hits, you go to the pharmacy. You stand in front of that nausea aisle, glossy boxes, official branding, $12, $14, $19 for the name brand, and you pick something. You pay, you go home. And nobody ever mentioned that the produce section was holding the older, cheaper, better documented answer the entire time. Stay with me. In 1982, a double-blind study was published. I am going to come back to that study. What those researchers measured, not just what they tested, but what they actually found, is going to reframe everything. The US Navy was paying close attention to that research for reasons of its own. Hold on to that. But first, here is where this story actually begins. While pulling through a digitized archive of Bureau of American Ethnology field records from the 1930s, a particular page stopped everything. The Bureau documented indigenous American communities across the country, language, culture, plant knowledge, and household practices. Their field researchers worked through Cherokee communities in the Appalachian region in the early 20th century and wrote down what they saw. Not interpretations, not romanticized impressions. Practical details, remedies, plant names, the methods community members used with the calm ease of people describing entirely ordinary things. One field note listed preparations using Zingiber officinale, ginger root, alongside native plant equivalents used by Cherokee families for stomach ailments and nausea. The handwriting was tight. The notes were matter-of-fact. A margin annotation read, essentially, widely used, broadly known, no notable variation across households. Widely used, broadly known, no notable variation. That is not the language of secret knowledge. That is the language of something so ordinary it barely warranted a full sentence. Like noting that people put salt on wounds or wrapped cold cloth around fevers. It was just what you did. So how does something that documented, that widely practiced, that embedded in everyday household life, how does it end up invisible? Here is the mechanism, not the chemistry lecture, just the part that matters. Ginger contains active compounds, gingerols, and shogaols. Those names are not important. What they do is, these compounds work directly on the digestive system and the nerve pathways running between the gut and the brain, the exact pathways responsible for triggering nausea. The root talks to the part of the nervous system the pills are trying to reach, but without the synthetic detour. For motion sickness, for morning sickness, for post-meal nausea, for the low-grade sickness that stress and anxiety produce. This is a broad documented response, not a narrow one. Cherokee communities in the Appalachian region knew this, not from a laboratory, from accumulated, observed, generational experience, recorded eventually in ethnobotanical field notes, and later confirmed in peer-reviewed research that almost nobody outside specialized circles ever read. The knowledge did not stay isolated to one community. Early American settlers moving through Cherokee territory adopted plant knowledge for practical survival. Ginger preparations appeared in household remedy guides throughout the 1800s. Druggist manuals from the early 20th century referenced ginger for gastric complaints. Home health books recommended it without hesitation. This was not fringe knowledge. This was not the territory of eccentrics. It was ordinary, trusted, widely used household practice. Then 1938 happened. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act redrew the rules for any remedy making a health claim. To hold shelf space with approved indications, a product needed clinical trial data. Clinical trials cost millions. And ginger root, a $2 rhizome that grows in ordinary soil, cannot be patented. No patent means no exclusive financial return. No return means no pharmaceutical company funds the required trials. No funded trials means no approved claims. And without approved claims, the pharmacy nausea aisle gets built around what can be owned, not around what works best. It was not banned. Nothing that direct happened. It got sidelined, quietly, structurally, without a single dramatic announcement. And that is how you end up standing in a nausea aisle spending $14 on a product that a 1930s field notebook treated as too obvious to bother explaining in full. Now go back to 1982. That double-blind study did not just test ginger. It tested ginger head-to-head against Dramamine, one of the most purchased anti-nausea products in pharmacy history. And here's what the researchers actually found, and here is why you have never heard a single pharmacist mention it. The study was published in The Lancet, not a wellness blog, not a naturopathy newsletter. The Lancet, one of the most rigorously peer-reviewed medical journals on the planet, founded in 1823, cited in medical literature more times than most researchers can count. In 1982, Daniel Maury and Dennis Clayson put ginger root into a controlled, double-blind trial against Dramamine for motion sickness. The subjects were rotated in a tilted spinning chair designed to produce symptoms. The results were not ambiguous. Ginger outperformed Dramamine, not matched it, outperformed it. And the U.S. Navy, which had been independently researching low-cost, side-effect, minimal solutions for sailors dealing with seasickness on long deployments, was paying close attention. This is the part nobody tells you. That study landed in one of the world's most prestigious journals, backed by measurable controlled data, and it changed almost nothing on a pharmacy shelf. Not because the results were disputed, not because the methodology collapsed under scrutiny, because there was no mechanism to act on it commercially. Ginger cannot be patented. No company could take those results, build an exclusive product around them, and recover a marketing investment. So the study sat, cited quietly in academic circles, ignored in the aisle where it should have mattered most. That is not a conspiracy. That is a structural outcome. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Here is the number that makes the structure visible. The commercial anti-nausea market in the United States is worth over $1.2 billion annually. Read that again. $1.2 billion. Built on branded tablets, flavored dissolvable strips, and prescription antiemetics, most of which are targeting the same nerve pathway that a $2 root was already reaching centuries ago. Ginger root does not get a share of that market. It cannot. The economics of patent-driven pharmaceutical development have no mechanism to promote something that anyone can grow in a pot on a windowsill. This was never about safety. It was never about efficacy. It was about what could be owned. And the suppression, if you want to use that word, was not a boardroom decision. It was quieter than that. It was the slow institutional drift away from anything that could not generate return. Traditional plant knowledge does not fit that model. Cherokee community remedies do not fit that model. Ethnobotanical field notes sitting in government archives do not fit that model, so they stayed in the archives. And the nausea aisle kept expanding. But the research did not stop. Stay with me. The University of Michigan's Integrative Medicine program produced studies on ginger for chemotherapy-related nausea, one of the most debilitating and difficult to treat forms of nausea in clinical medicine. The results were significant enough to draw serious institutional attention. And the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, not an alternative wellness organization, one of the most mainstream medical bodies in the country, at one point formally listed ginger as a first-line recommendation for pregnancy-related nausea. Not a footnote, not a reluctant mention, a first-line option, recommended before pharmaceutical intervention in certain cases. These are not fringe sources. These are exactly the kind of institutional acknowledgments that should have pushed ginger root from the supplement aisle back into the front end of the pharmacy. They did not. because the commercial infrastructure had already been built around products that could be monetized, and that infrastructure does not reorganize itself around a $2 route without a profit engine driving the change. This knowledge was never fringe. It was always real. It was simply inconvenient for a system built on owning solutions rather than sharing them. Your grocery store has ginger root in the produce section, fresh, usually under $2 for a piece, large enough to last through several uses. Dried ginger sits in the spice aisle. Powdered ginger has been in most kitchen cabinets for decades without most people understanding what they actually had. For general stomach unease, for travel-related nausea, for the morning sickness that turns early pregnancy into an endurance event, for the low nausea that follows a heavy meal or a stressful day. This is what Cherokee communities documented, what early American households kept in practice, what a Lancet-published study confirmed, and what a billion-dollar market has spent decades making you walk right past. You do not need a prescription. You do not need a pharmacy visit. You do not need to spend $14 on a branded box that is targeting the same pathway you have had access to all along. This is what gets buried, not always by dramatic suppression, sometimes just by the slow accumulation of commercial noise that drowns out the simpler answer. Cherokee knowledge, ethnobotanical field notes, a 1930s government archive, a 1982 Lancet study, a U.S. Navy research program, University Integrative Medicine trials, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and a $2 root in your grocery store produce section. It wasn't buried because it didn't work. It was buried because it worked too simply, too cheaply, and couldn't be owned. You are now the person in your family who knows that, not because you read a wellness blog, because you follow the actual documented chain from Cherokee community practice to ethnobotanical record to peer-reviewed trial to institutional recommendation, and you saw where it led and why it stopped. Most people walk past ginger root every week without a second thought. You will not do that anymore. If you have ever reached for ginger before a pharmacy product, for motion sickness, for morning sickness, for anything, drop it in the comments. Tell me if it worked. I want to know how many people already knew this without anyone ever officially telling them. And one more thing, that same Bureau of American Ethnology field notebook, the one with the ginger entry, the tight handwriting, the matter-of-fact margin notes, had another entry directly below it, a bark remedy, used across Appalachian communities for something that now costs people hundreds of dollars a month to manage. That one is coming next.